On a warm night in the summer of 1982, fishermen in Colorado's Boulder Canyon spotted something in the water below. It wasn't driftwood. It was the body of a young woman, stabbed repeatedly and dumped in the canyon. Within days, another victim would be found. And the man behind these murders had already killed before, served time, escaped custody, and been given a second chance at freedom. This is the story of how a quiet man from Illinois became a hidden serial killer, and how the truth about his crimes only fully came out after he died. You're listening to Behind the Crime. This week, John William Agrue, murder, escape, parole, and the cold case work that finally revealed the full extent of his violence. To understand John Agrue, you have to start in Joliet, Illinois in the 1960s. Born in 1947 in El Paso, Texas, Agrue had moved north and married into the Marino family. On July 21, 1966, 18-year-old John met his 15-year-old sister-in-law, Susan Marino, in downtown Joliet. He asked her to go with him to Hamel Woods, a nearby forest preserve. Once they were alone, Agrue made romantic advances toward her. Susan rejected him. In response, he pulled out a small knife and stabbed her around a dozen times, killing her in the woods. Later that same day, he went home and told his wife what he had done. At first, she did not believe him. To prove it, he drove her back to the crime scene, showing her where he had left Susan's purse and shoes. His wife urged him to turn himself in. Instead, Agrue went to a local church and confessed to a priest, who contacted the police. 2 days later, he was in custody and admitting to the murder, saying he killed Susan because she refused his advances. The case moved quickly. With his confession and the physical evidence, Agrue was convicted and sentenced to 20 to 50 years in prison and sent to Joliet Correctional Center. Behind bars, Agrue didn't disappear from family life completely. In the mid-1970s, his sister Kathleen needed a kidney transplant, and Agrue was a match. In December 1975, he was transported from prison to the University of Illinois Hospital in Chicago for the surgery. Authorities were nervous. About 50 prison employees even volunteered to help supervise him on their days off, worried he might try to escape. The operation was delayed until May 4, 1976, and after it finally went ahead, Agrue was supposed to remain in the hospital to recover, and this is where everything goes wrong. On May 11th, he was reported missing. Earlier that day, he had climbed out of a bathroom window and slipped away from the hospital. He stole a car, drove it until he crossed state lines, then abandoned it. From there, he lived on the move. He hitchhiked, stole other cars, and used fake IDs as he headed west, telling people he was going to California. About a week later, police in Central City, Nebraska, got a report of a stolen car. They arrested Agrue without resistance, and he was extradited back to Illinois to continue serving his sentence. The escape was short-lived, but it showed how determined he was to get free. Despite the escape, John Agrue eventually got another chance. In January 1982, he was paroled and chose to move to Colorado, staying first in Boulder and then in nearby Longmont with relatives. That summer, his violence resurfaced. In late June 1982, he encountered 20-year-old Susan Becker somewhere near Boulder. Agrue stabbed her 13 times in the chest, clavicle, and neck, then dumped her body in Boulder Canyon. Fishermen found her on July 1st. At the time, investigators did look at Agrue as a suspect, but did not pursue him aggressively and eventually wrote him off. So he's a convicted murderer, recently paroled, living in the area, and still they let him slip. About a week after Becker's body was discovered, Agrue struck again. This time, the victim was his 94-year-old neighbor in Longmont, Orma B. Smith, a retired librarian. He stabbed her to death in her apartment, then dumped her body in Big Elk Creek Meadows, where it was found the next day. 6 days later, on the campus of the University of Colorado Boulder, Agrue attempted to abduct another woman at knife point. This time, he failed. She got away, and university police arrested him on the spot. Publicly, Agrue was named as a suspect in the murder of Orma Smith, but prosecutors didn't have enough concrete evidence to charge him with that killing. In March 1983, Agrue was convicted of the attempted abduction in Colorado. Instead of serving that sentence there first, he was immediately sent back to Illinois for violating his parole. He remained behind bars until 1989, when he was paroled again. This time, he stayed in Joliet, Illinois, and lived there for the rest of his life. Officially, there are no known violent crimes linked to him after this second release. Unofficially, though, there were warning signs. One neighbor later reported that Agrue bragged in private about the murders and behaved in a disturbing way. She tried to obtain a restraining order, but the court denied it because he had not harmed her personally. So you have a convicted murderer, suspected in 2 more killings, telling stories about his crimes, and still living freely in the community. On June 29, 2009, family members found 61-year-old John William Agrue dead at his home in Joliet. An autopsy ruled the cause of death as an accidental overdose of prescription medication. When relatives went through his home, they discovered women's purses and jewelry, along with newspaper clippings about the Colorado murders of Susan Becker and Orma Smith, and his own attempted abduction case. Those discoveries drew renewed attention from investigators. A cold case unit began testing Agrue's DNA to see whether he could be definitively linked to the unsolved murder of Orma Smith. Almost a year later, the results came back. His DNA matched evidence from the Smith crime scene, and authorities officially closed the case, naming him as the killer. At that point, he was still only a suspect in Susan Becker's murder. Because there was little usable DNA from that scene, detectives had to rely on other evidence: his presence in the area, the similarity in method, and his pattern of violence. In May 2013, authorities announced that Agrue was the sole and most likely suspect in Becker's murder, and they considered the case effectively solved. With that, John Agrue was posthumously labeled a serial killer. State police and the FBI also said they would review other cold cases to see whether his DNA or history might connect him to additional crimes. As of January 2025, no other cases have been formally linked to him. The case of John Agrue raises difficult questions. A man convicted of stabbing his teenage sister-in-law to death was given medical furlough, escaped, and later received parole not once, but twice. After that, he went on to kill at least 2 more women and attempt a 3rd abduction, yet he was never convicted for those murders in his lifetime. It took decades and advances in DNA analysis to connect him beyond doubt to one Colorado murder and to build the case for another, turning a single known killer into a recognized serial offender only after his death. It's a story about one man's violence, but also about how gaps in supervision, parole decisions, and investigative follow-through can let a killer keep moving. John William Agrue died quietly in his own home, but the truth about what he did not die with him. The victims, Susan Marino, Orma B. Smith, and almost certainly Susan Becker, can never be brought back, but their cases remind us why cold case work and accountability in the justice system matter. This has been Behind the Crime. If you found this episode informative, follow the show and share it with someone who's into true crime and the stories behind how cases are solved or missed. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.